I never imagined that one icy gust could rewrite the story of my life. That morning, my only cashmere scarf tore free and fluttered toward a stranger. When I chased after it, heart-pounding, I had no idea I was leaping into my destiny. In that split second, compassion eclipsed convenience, and I crossed an invisible line. The subway station was already buzzing with its usual rhythm that morning. The metallic groan of trains arriving, the shuffle of hurried footsteps, the hum of conversation swallowed by the cavernous air. I was lost in my thoughts, weighed down by deadlines, projects, and the constant race of urban life. My scarf, a soft ivory cashmere, was wrapped securely around my neck, the one luxury I had allowed myself after clawing my way through my early years of struggle. It wasn't just fabric. That scarf had become a piece of me, a reminder that hard work eventually pays off, that little acts of self-reward matter. I'd worn it through late-night office sprints, long subway rides home, and even lonely weekends when I needed to feel comforted by something soft and familiar. To me, it wasn't only warmth. It was a symbol of independence. But fate, I learned that morning, can snatch symbols away in an instant. A sudden gust of wind rushed through the station like a force of nature, snatching my scarf from its careful knot. My heart jolted as I saw it tear free, twisting in the air like a delicate ribbon caught in a storm. It floated beyond my grasp, skimming past commuters who barely looked up, until it landed against the chest of a figure sitting alone on a wooden bench. I ran after it, weaving through startled passers-by, my heels clicking urgently on the tiled floor. My breath grew ragged, my pulse quickened, but I didn't stop. When I finally reached the bench, I froze, not because of the scarf, but because of the man holding it. His clothes were worn, threadbare in places. His jacket sagged with age, its fabric peppered with patches and frayed seams. His hands, rough and calloused, tightened around my scarf as though he feared it might fly away again. His posture spoke of a long, unrelenting burden, shoulders hunched under invisible weight. When he looked up, his eyes met mine. They weren't pleading, nor ashamed. Instead, they carried something unexpected: depth, gratitude, and surprise. For a long heartbeat, neither of us spoke. Around us the subway roared, but in that suspended moment, it was silent. I could have snatched the scarf back. I could have muttered a quick apology and rushed off to catch my train. But something inside me shifted. A voice whispered that this scarf wasn't mine to reclaim. It had found its rightful place. So instead, I smiled faintly, lifted the scarf, and gently wrapped it around his neck. His lips parted, almost as if to protest, but he stayed still. I adjusted it carefully so that it sat warmly against his skin, a shield against the cold. His shoulders lifted, testing the unfamiliar. Comfort. He gave me a nod, small, restrained, yet brimming with meaning. My chest tightened at that simple gesture. I wanted to say something, stay warm, or take care, but the words felt too small. Instead, I turned away, my heart pounding with an emotion I couldn't name. I leapt onto my train just as the doors closed, watching through the glass as his silhouette blurred behind me, scarf glowing like a beacon against the station's dim light. The rest of the day passed in fragments. I sat at my desk, staring at screens filled with numbers and charts, but my mind replayed his eyes, his nod, and the way my scarf had seemed to settle on him, as if it had been waiting all along. That night, when my phone buzzed, a message appeared from an unknown number. Just 2 words. Thank you. No name, no details, only gratitude that cut deeper than anything I had expected. I stared at the message for a long time, my chest tightening as I remembered his face. Could a scarf really mean so much? Or had I given him something far more valuable, proof that someone cared? I didn't sleep much that night. My dreams kept returning to the subway, to the soft whisper of fabric and the silent exchange of kindness. And when morning broke, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message was longer. Meet me before sunrise. 50th floor, Meridian Tower. The name jolted me. Meridian Tower, the skyscraper that defined the city skyline, headquarters of one of the world's most powerful companies. Why there? Why me? My hands trembled as I pulled on my coat, slipping the scarf's absence into my pocket like a missing heartbeat. As I walked through the city toward the tower, the cold air no longer felt biting. It felt like a summons. My scarf had led me somewhere I could never have imagined, and I sensed that what awaited me at the top would change everything. When I rode the express elevator to the 50th floor, the doors reluctantly slid open on marble and glass. A lone figure stood by the panoramic windows, scarf-less but unmistakable. He faced away, gazing at the awakening skyline, then turned, mask off, eyes alight with certainty. "Welcome," he said softly. "You've already given me everything I needed." And in that moment, I realized I was no longer just a stranger's act of warmth. I was his partner in something far greater. At exactly midnight, my phone buzzed with a message that made my pulse race. "Meet me at the top floor. I have something to show you." Those words echoed in my mind as I climbed the gleaming tower's stairs. In that instant, I knew my life would unravel the moment I stepped onto that penthouse terrace. It was past midnight when the vibration of my phone sliced through the stillness of my apartment. I groggily reached for it, expecting a late-night email or some routine notification, but the moment my eyes adjusted to the glowing screen, I froze. The text was short, urgent, and electrifying. "Meet me at the top floor. I have something to show you." For a moment, I sat upright, the cashmere scarf still absent from my shoulders but heavy in my memory. My heart raced as though the subway's gust of wind had followed me home, demanding I respond. The top floor? Meridian Tower's penthouse? My mind scrambled to make sense of it, yet something deeper, instinct perhaps, told me this wasn't an invitation I could ignore. Throwing on a coat, I slipped my shoes on without thinking and tied my hair into a messy knot. I caught sight of myself in the mirror, pale with anticipation, eyes too wide. But there was a determination I had never seen before. I left my apartment, the city outside hushed under a velvet sky. The streets were almost deserted, save for the occasional taxi sweeping past with a streak of yellow light. Neon signs blinked faintly, and a thin mist coiled over the pavement. As I approached Meridian Tower, its glass facade stretched upward like a beacon, lit with the kind of brilliance that whispered power and secrecy. My breath caught. I had walked by this building countless times, never imagining I'd be invited inside, especially not at midnight. The lobby was silent, its marble floors gleaming under chandeliers that swung faintly from the draft of the revolving doors. Two doormen stood rigid, their expressions unreadable, as though this was just another night in their world of privilege. My footsteps echoed too loudly as I crossed the mosaic floor and pressed the call button for the elevator. The express lift opened with a hushed sigh, and I stepped into its glass chamber. The ascent was smooth, silent, and dizzying. Each glowing number, 12, 20, 30, 40, brought me closer to whatever awaited me. My reflection in the glass trembled with each breath, but there was no turning back. When the display lit up 50, my pulse nearly drowned out the mechanical hum. The doors slid open onto the penthouse terrace, and the sight stole my breath. The city sprawled before me, skyscrapers glittering like constellations, streets glowing with golden threads of traffic. It was as though I had stepped onto the edge of the universe. And then I saw him. He stood at the terrace railing, his mask gone, his figure dressed not in the tattered jacket I remembered, but in a navy suit that seemed to belong to the skyline itself. His hair caught the breeze, his stance poised with a quiet authority that made the world bend toward him. He turned as though he had been waiting all along. That same smile, the one etched with gratitude on the subway, now carried something deeper, steadier. He extended his hand, palm open, and I stepped forward, each footfall a surrender to fate. When I reached him, He pulled from his pocket a photograph. My breath hitched as I took it. The image was of a little girl, bundled in a scarf that looked uncannily like mine, her mother beside her. My throat tightened. That child was me. How do you have this?" I stammered. His gaze softened. It was in my father's desk, marked only with the words, "To the one who believed." For years I kept it, unsure of what it meant. But the moment I met you on that platform, I knew. His voice caught with the weight of confession. You weren't just a stranger. You were the person who gave me warmth when I had none. Tears burned behind my eyes. Memories blurred, but the scarf remained, the constant thread. Somehow, across years and circumstance, it had bound us. He slipped a locket into my hand. Inside were 2 tiny portraits, one of me as a child, swaddled in the scarf, and one of him as a boy, gaunt and fragile. My chest tightened as the truth unfurled. You were that child." He nodded, voice low. "And you were the light that reminded me to hope." The world seemed to tilt. I remembered the nod he'd given me that morning on the subway, the silent gratitude, the unspoken connection. Now it stretched back further than I could comprehend. Then, as if the revelation wasn't enough, he produced a gold-embossed card. My name was etched beneath his, co-founder and chief compassion officer. I stared, heart pounding, as he whispered, "Will you help me change the world?" My hands trembled, clutching the photograph, the locket, and the card. The city glittered behind him like a stage waiting for its curtain to rise. In that moment, I knew life had shifted forever. As I looked up, the city lights shimmered like constellations mapped for our partnership. Yet before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. An urgent alert from his private line. "Boardroom emergency. A crisis only you can solve." My pulse spiked. The empire built on our scarf's promise was already under threat. He took my hand, eyes fierce with conviction. "Shall we?" Hearing him say my name in that penthouse felt like déjà vu and destiny entwined. He spoke of a night I'd never remember, when my scarf had saved his dream. Only then did I realize our connection ran deeper than a subway gesture. I sat across from him in the penthouse, my fingers still brushing the edge of the photograph he had given me. My name sounded different when spoken by him, full of memory and reverence, as though he had carried it in silence, long before we ever met. The air between us felt thick with untold history, a weight pressing down until he finally began to speak. "That winter," he said slowly, his gaze drifting toward the glittering skyline, "I had nothing but rags for warmth and a notebook to hold my thoughts. I had no reason to believe in tomorrow." His voice cracked slightly, betraying the calm exterior. "But then, your scarf found me." I listened, captivated, as he described that freezing night. The subway platform had been empty, he explained, except for the cold biting at his bones and the fear gnawing at his stomach. He had been hungry, hopeless, and ready to give up. When my scarf landed on him, it wasn't just fabric. It was a lifeline. From inside his jacket, he pulled out an old leather-bound journal. Its corners were bent, its pages yellowed, but it was clearly precious. He opened to a dated entry, his finger tracing faded ink. I leaned forward, heart pounding, as he read aloud. December 14th. I dream of sleep that isn't haunted by hunger. I dreamed of silk once, long ago. Tonight I tasted it again when a scarf touched my skin. Maybe it means tomorrow will be different. The words blurred before my eyes, because I could see them. The despair, the small flicker of hope. That hope had been me, unknowingly. My scarf, my gesture. He closed the journal gently, as if sealing away a piece of himself. I read those lines every night after. Your kindness didn't end at that platform. It lived in my thoughts. It became the reason I kept going. His eyes locked on mine. That scarf wasn't just warmth. It was proof that someone, somewhere, cared if I survived. My throat tightened as I held the fragile pages, overwhelmed by the realization that what I had considered small had been monumental for him. In that moment, I felt both humbled and terrified, because if such a small act could change a life, then perhaps I carried more power than I ever realized. Then he pulled out something else, a faded receipt, crumpled but intact. "This," he said, placing it into my trembling hand, "is the shelter voucher I bought with the first little money I dared to spend after that night. It bought me soup. It gave me one more day. I've kept it as a reminder." I stared at the stamped paper, my name not written anywhere on it, yet my presence carved deeply into its meaning. My scarf, my gesture, had given him the courage to choose survival. He leaned closer, his voice thick with conviction. "That was the night you saved me. Not with riches, not with promises, but with compassion. And I vowed that if I ever built anything, it would be in honor of that moment." Tears filled my eyes as I placed the voucher carefully on top of his journal. His empire, his success, his entire life's trajectory. It all tied back to something as fragile as fabric and as enduring as kindness. Then he handed me a sealed envelope. Wax pressed with my initials held it shut. My hands shook as I broke the seal and unfolded the heavy parchment. At the top were bold words: "Caldwell and Everett Partnership Agreement." I gasped as I saw my name. Eliza Everett, founding partner and chief compassion officer. I looked up, stunned. "Why me?" I whispered. His eyes shone with certainty. "Because you were there at my lowest. Because your kindness was the seed that grew into everything I have now. And because the world needs your compassion, guiding this mission as much as it needs my leadership." The weight of his trust pressed against my chest. A swirl of doubts crowded my mind. Was I ready for such responsibility? Could I live up to his faith? But then I remembered the subway platform, his nod of gratitude, and the truth written in his journal. I had already changed his world once without even trying. Now he was asking me to change it again, deliberately, together. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen lying beside the agreement. The tip hovered over the signature line. This was more than a business decision. It was a vow to honor the power of compassion, to anchor it in something permanent. I pressed ink to paper. He slid a sealed packet across the marble table. "Proposed First Initiative." My fingers trembled as I peeled back the top sheet. Plans for a global relief network. But beneath the blueprints lay a single ominous note. "Approved by the board, if you both survive the next vote." I looked up, alarm flaring in his eyes. "There's more you need to see." And in that tense silence, I realized our partnership would face its first and most dangerous test. He led me through glass doors into a world of sleek hallways and silent power. Every corner held proof of his ascent, from startup snapshots tacked to whiteboards to gleaming trophies lining his shelves. I stood in awe, clutching my cashmere scarf and the gravity of his success. That afternoon, I realized my small act had sparked a revolution. The elevator doors slid open onto a floor unlike anything I had ever seen. Sunlight spilled through vast windows, bouncing off polished stone floors that gleamed as though they had been cut from glaciers. The silence was striking, not the absence of life, but the hush of carefully contained energy, the kind of silence that whispers of power at rest. Ethan gestured for me to follow, his stride confident, his presence filling the corridor. As we walked, I felt like a child in a museum where every exhibit belonged to history. But this wasn't history. It was his life, his empire. Each office door bore an etched title: Chief Innovation Officer, Global CEO, Founder's Suite. The names alone carried a gravity that made my pulse quicken. We passed walls lined with photographs. In one, a younger Ethan sat cross-legged in a tiny room, tinkering with crude prototypes made of scrap metal. In another, he stood beside volunteers in a dusty village, smiling as solar panels lit up homes for the first time. Beside these hung glossy magazine covers, Visionary of the Year, top 100 changemakers, humanitarian CEO. I paused at one frame. A newspaper article showing a water pump surrounded by villagers, their faces alight with joy. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Dedicated to the kindness that started it all." My chest tightened as I realized he was referring to my scarf. We turned a corner, and suddenly a massive holographic map shimmered before us, suspended in midair. Blue outlines traced continents, and tiny golden lights blinked across the globe. Ethan raised his hand, and with a swipe, the display zoomed into one of the lights. I gasped as a village appeared in 3D, projection. Women filling jugs at clean water pumps, children studying under bright lamps, farmers tending fields made fertile by irrigation. "This," he said softly, "is the heart of Caldwell Industries. Not profit margins, not boardroom victories, impact." His eyes lingered on the glowing villages. "Every light is a project. Every dot is a life touched." I clutched my scarf tighter, suddenly aware that the very thread of compassion I had once offered him now stretched across oceans. My small gesture had become a seed that grew into this sprawling forest of change. He led me into a vast corner office. The windows revealed a panoramic sweep of the skyline, but my gaze was drawn to the desk. Sleek walnut, polished to perfection. At its center rested two objects, the photograph of me as a child in my scarf, and the silver locket he had given me the night before. "Everything I've built," he said, gesturing toward the skyline. "I wanted to show you, because it's not just mine. It's ours. Without you, there would have been no beginning." His words sank deep into me. For years I had worked in cubicles, chasing deadlines, measuring life by checklists and achievements. Yet here stood a man who had taken a single act of kindness and turned it into a revolution. I wondered, what had I really accomplished in comparison? But before self-doubt could take root, Ethan placed a hand gently on my shoulder. "Don't question your worth. Without you, none of this exists." He guided me through hidden doors into a prototype lab. Unlike the polished corridors, this room buzzed with raw energy. 3D printers hummed, engineers moved between stations, and on a central platform stood a gleaming device, compact, metallic, pulsing faintly with light. "This is our next leap," he explained, resting his hand on the machine. "A portable water purifier, solar-powered and hand-cranked, designed for villages cut off from modern infrastructure. Imagine millions of lives drinking clean water." Because of this, I traced the machine's smooth edges, overwhelmed by its potential. My scarf slipped slightly from my shoulder, and Ethan adjusted it with surprising care, almost ceremonially, as though reminding me that this too was part of the blueprint. I nodded, voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Let's do it. Let's take this to the world." His smile widened, but almost immediately, his smartwatch blinked. The lab's lights dimmed, and an alert flashed red across the nearest console. Ethan's expression hardened. He tapped his smartwatch, and the lab lights dimmed, eyes flicking to the emergency alert, blinking on a console. "Region X, natural disaster imminent." My blood ran cold. Our prototype launch was scheduled there next month. He squeezed my hand. "They need us now." As alarms echoed faintly in the distance, I realized that our grand vision faced its first real test, saving lives before our plans could even unfold. And in that moment, the Empire's true purpose revealed itself. When he offered me a seat at his boardroom table, I realized kindness could lead to power. My first handshake with investors felt like stepping onto a new stage, one illuminated not by spotlights, but by profound purpose. Together, we would turn compassion into capital and transform the world. In that moment, I crossed an invisible threshold from observer to co-architect of change, and I never looked back. The morning sun spilled golden light through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Caldwell Industries' towering boardroom. The city stretched far below, humming with its own ambitions, but here, on the top floor, Everything felt elevated, weightier. A long mahogany table dominated the room, polished to a mirror shine, where 17 board members sat in silence, their expressions fixed in curiosity and calculation. I stood at the doorway, scarf draped loosely over my shoulders, the partnership charter clutched tightly in my hand. My heart hammered like a drum in my chest, each beat echoing louder than the muffled hum of the overhead lights. This was the moment Ethan had promised. My introduction not as an outsider, not as a token, but as his equal. He rose from the head of the table, the air shifting with his calm authority. His navy blazer hung perfectly against his frame, but it was his eyes that commanded the room, warm, steady, unwavering. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice smooth yet resolute, "today, you will meet the person who embodies this company's mission better than anyone else. My partner, Eliza Everett, co-founder and chief impact officer of Caldwell," and Everett polite applause rippled. But the weight of it struck me deeply. I stepped forward, each footfall carrying the gravity of everything we had endured to arrive here. The scarf, the subway, the locket, the journal. When I extended my hand to the board chair, Ms. Ramirez, her grip was firm, deliberate, and her subtle nod told me what words could not. "You belong here." Sliding into the empty chair beside Ethan, I placed my scarf across my lap like a talisman. Before me lay the embossed partnership charter, heavy with responsibility. The gold-nibbed fountain pen glinted under the lights, daring me to write my name into history. I drew in a breath and spoke, addressing not just the board, but myself. This company is proof that profit and compassion are not opposites. They are partners. Every success we've had stems not only from innovation, but from empathy. My voice steadied as I glanced at Ethan. He nodded subtly, his support a quiet anchor. Taking the pen, I signed my name, Eliza Everett. Each loop of ink was more than a signature. It was a vow to champion voices often unheard, to steer resources into hands that needed them most, to measure wealth not merely in numbers, but in lives transformed. The room seemed to shift as cameras clicked, flashes capturing the moment. Applause rose again, more genuine this time. Investors leaned forward with intrigue, reporters scribbled notes furiously, and I felt something in my chest crack open. Possibility. After the signing, Ethan guided me to a podium set before the panoramic view of the city. Microphones gleamed, their cords snaking across the polished floor. I swallowed hard, but when I spoke, the words flowed with surprising ease. "Today marks a turning point," I declared. "We will prove that compassion is not a weakness. It is our greatest strength. Every project we launch, every dollar we invest, will be guided by this truth. Humanity thrives when kindness leads." The applause this time was thunderous, echoing against glass and marble. For the first time, I felt the power not of money, but of conviction amplified through others. That evening, Ethan and I retreated to his private office. The city lights outside twinkled like scattered diamonds, and between us lay champagne flutes filled with golden bubbles. He raised his glass. "To our partnership," he said, voice low, "and to the revolution it will spark." I clinked my glass against his, the scarf brushing softly against my wrist. "To kindness," I added. We spent hours poring over blueprints and spreadsheets, not of profit projections, but of impact. Microloan programs for women in rural villages, scholarship initiatives for first-generation students, disaster relief protocols ready to activate at a moment's notice. Every plan was a seed of hope waiting to be sown. By the time I returned home, exhausted yet electrified, I set the scarf gently on my nightstand. My phone buzzed ceaselessly. Emails from NGOS, invitations to interviews, congratulatory messages from strangers who believed in our story. I lay in bed, overwhelmed but certain. I was no longer a bystander. I was a builder. Moments before dawn, an encrypted alert blinked on my screen. SEC inquiry launched. Allegations of misappropriated funds. Investigate immediately. My blood ran cold as I realized our bold alliance had already attracted powerful enemies. He appeared at my door, determination in his eyes. They'll come for us. Are you ready to fight? And in that tense silence, I knew our mission's greatest test was only just beginning. Rumors swirled that I was a mere figurehead, and that our partnership was nothing more than a savvy PR stunt. Anonymous letters landed on his mahogany desk, handwritten accusations questioning my credentials, my character, and my very motives. In that swelling storm of skepticism and suspicion, our shared vision faced its first true crucible. Would compassion endure the gale of doubt, or would our fragile alliance crumble beneath the weight of unspoken fears? The storm began quietly. An email forwarded from our CFO with the subject line, "Stakeholder Concerns." Inside was a scan of a handwritten letter, its tone sharp, its accusations cutting. "This woman is nothing but a marketing prop," it sneered. "She has no experience, no qualifications. This partnership is a farce designed to inflate share prices." My chest tightened as I read it. Words that once lifted me, partner, leader, co-founder, now felt twisted into weapons. Across town, in Ethan's office, the same letter lay on his desk. His jaw tightened as he read, anger flashing across his usually calm features. He folded the page neatly, almost too carefully, and said in a voice hard as steel, "We face this head on. No hiding. No delays. Call the board." By midday, the boardroom buzzed with tension. The long table was filled with directors, investors, and advisors. My scarf lay folded in my lap, grounding me as I faced their skepticism. One by one, questions cut through the air. How do we know these funds aren't being misused? What safeguards exist against mismanagement? Can this partnership survive scrutiny when one half of it has no proven track record? Each word stung, but I refused to shrink. Rising to my feet, I steadied my breath and began to answer. I laid out the rigorous protocols we had implemented: independent audits, third-party oversight, transparent quarterly reports. But numbers alone were not enough. So I told stories. I spoke of Amina, a Somali mother who used our microloan to build a weaving cooperative that now employed a dozen women. Of a rural school in Nepal where our solar panels lit classrooms during monsoons. Of a boy in Brazil who could now study at night because our scholarships kept his lights on. The room shifted as I spoke. Frowns softened. Pens stilled. Skepticism gave way to reluctant curiosity. But outside those walls, the rumors spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed across gossip sites. Kashmir CEO's protege, visionary or con artist. One blog accused me of being nothing but a pretty face in a scarf. Comment threads spiraled into mockery. Each insult lodged like a shard of glass beneath my ribs. That night, I sat with Ethan in his office, the city skyline glowing beyond the glass. He drafted a public statement, firm, transparent, defiant. "They think compassion is weakness," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "Let's show them it's our greatest strength." The days that followed were a blur of interviews, Q&As, and open house events. We invited journalists to our sites, let them see the impact firsthand. Slowly, perception began to shift. Messages of support trickled in, then flooded. Investors who once doubted us called with renewed faith. Yet even in victory, doubt lingered within me. I found myself questioning my worth late at night. Was I really capable? Did I belong here? But just when the questions threatened to drown me, a text appeared on my phone. "Remember why you started. Compassion sparked a revolution. Thank you." The same words he had once sent after I gave him my scarf. My eyes filled with tears as I realized doubt would come and go, but compassion was unshakable. Weeks later, the board reconvened. This time, Ethan and I presented together. Slide after slide displayed both financial discipline and measurable social impact. When the final video played, lanterns lighting up a dark village school, the room erupted in applause. "You have weathered your first storm," the chairwoman said, her smile genuine. "And you are stronger for it." In that moment I understood. Doubt is not a sign of failure. It is a crucible, and in surviving it, our partnership had been tempered into something unbreakable. Just as relief began to settle like soft raindrops on our triumph, my inbox pinged with an urgent alert. Critical laboratory fire at pilot site, Alpha. Prototype purified water units compromised. My chest tightened. Our next essential project, months in development, now lay in jeopardy. He looked up from his screen, jaw clenched in resolve. "We'll rebuild faster." But as the fire alarm report scrolled across the screen, I understood our toughest battle was only beginning. A single alarm at 2 a.m. shattered our hard-won peace. The prototype lab was ablaze. Flames licked hungrily through our pioneering work, reducing months of meticulous research to smoldering ruins. In that moment, we faced the stark choice to crumble under the inferno's heat, or harness its fury to rebuild stronger than before. Only one path led to true impact, rising from the ashes together. The shrill wail of my phone pierced the silence of night. At first I thought it was another alert, maybe another baseless rumor. But when I saw the words flashing on the screen, "Fire alert, prototype lab," my blood ran cold. I threw on a coat, the scarf clenched instinctively in my hand, and raced out into the street. The night air was thick with smoke, a bitter smell that coated my lungs. Red and blue lights strobed against nearby buildings as fire engines wailed toward the industrial campus we had built with so much care. When I arrived, the sight knocked the breath from me. The lab, our crown jewel, the birthplace of our purifier prototypes, was engulfed in flames. Windows shattered under the heat, sending sparks shooting into the night sky. Scientists and engineers stood outside, faces streaked with ash and tears, clutching notebooks and laptops saved at the last second. And then I saw him. Ethan emerged from the haze, coat collar pulled high against the embers, his face illuminated by the inferno. His eyes locked on mine, fierce, unbroken. He took my hand without a word, grounding me as though to say, "We will not be defeated." He pulled me aside, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We have two choices, Eliza. We let this fire define us, or we rebuild, stronger, faster, better. What do you choose?" My throat burned with smoke, but my answer was clear. We rebuild. From that moment, the recovery began. By dawn, we had transformed a nearby conference room into a makeshift command center. Whiteboards lined the walls, scribbled with emergency timelines. Teams of exhausted staff members divided into groups, one salvaging data from scorched hard drives, another coordinating with global partners for emergency funding, another drafting new safety protocols. Ethan worked the phones non-stop, his voice calm but urgent as he secured millions in emergency grants from donors in London, Tokyo, Nairobi. "They're watching us," he said between calls. "If we collapse now, we lose everything. But if we rise, they'll believe in us more than ever." Meanwhile, I met with our engineers, many of them in soot-stained lab coats, their faces etched with grief. "We lost so much," one whispered, clutching a charred notebook. I touched her shoulder gently. "We haven't lost hope. That's what matters most. And with hope, we can build again. Word of our determination spread." Soon, offers poured in from unexpected places. Rival labs offering spare parts. Universities lending research space. NGOs sending food and supplies for our displaced staff. News outlets that once questioned us now broadcast headlines like, "From ashes to action, Caldwell and Everett rise stronger." But the most powerful moment came days later. We stood in front of the blackened ruins, now reduced to twisted steel and rubble. Volunteers hammered together scaffolding for a new structure. Ethan handed me a marker and pointed to a fresh beam waiting to be hoisted. "Sign it," he urged. With shaking hands, I wrote, "Compassion endures. C and E will rise." The crowd around us cheered. For the first time since the fire, I felt the heat of hope outshine the sting of smoke. That night, as the last embers smoldered, Ethan and I stood side by side, coffee warming our hands. He looked at the rising framework of the new lab and said quietly, "This fire didn't destroy us. It purified us. It burned away doubt and left only conviction." I nodded, the scarf brushing against my cheek. "Then let's make sure the world sees what conviction can build." Weeks later, as I returned home one evening, I found smoke stains on my doorstep, evidence someone had trailed the fire's embers back to my sanctuary. Tucked beneath a charred matchbox was a chilling note. "Stop now, or lose everything." My chest tightened with dread as I reread the warning, realizing our resilience had drawn unseen enemies. He stepped beside me, voice fierce. "They've only fueled our fire. Now we fight back." But as I stared at that ominous message, I wondered, how far would they go to extinguish our dream? From the ashes of our prototype lab's devastating blaze, we orchestrated a comeback that secured a landmark $40 million investment, proof that resilience and vision can turn catastrophe into opportunity. When the lead investor personally conveyed his congratulations, I felt a profound surge of purpose, understanding that our greatest asset wasn't machinery or patents, but our unbreakable spirit. That triumph declared to the world, and to ourselves, that compassion tempered by tenacity is an unstoppable force. In that moment, I resolved that every dollar we raised would rebuild not only our lab, but the lives it would empower. The morning after the fire's smoke finally cleared, the campus felt both hollow and electric. The ruins of our prototype lab still smoldered, skeletal beams jutting into the gray sky like reminders of what we had lost. Yet within the temporary recovery tent we had erected beside the wreckage, there was no silence, only the buzz of laptops, the scratching of pens, the steady hum of determination. When I stepped onto the makeshift stage, a wooden pallet draped in our company's blue banner, hundreds of tired but resolute faces turned toward me. Scientists in soot-marked coats, engineers with grease still under their fingernails, interns clutching notebooks that smelled faintly of smoke, all waiting for a signal that this nightmare wasn't the end, but the beginning. Just hours before, the call had come. A representative from Meridian Global Impact Fund had seen the fire on the news. They had reviewed our data, our emergency recovery plans, our resolve to not just survive, but rise stronger. And now, after days of tense negotiations, they were offering us what no one dared imagine in the middle of disaster: a $40 million investment. I still felt the echo of the CEO's words in my chest. "We believe in your resilience. We want to help you rebuild and expand." When I shared the news, the room erupted. Cheers mingled with tears. Engineers embraced one another, project managers pumped fists in the air, and volunteers raised their phones to capture the moment. For the first time since the fire, the ashes no longer symbolized destruction. They symbolized rebirth. Ethan stepped beside me, his hand warm at my back as he addressed the crowd. "This investment is not charity. It is recognition of your brilliance, your perseverance, your faith. You have shown the world that compassion is not fragile. Today, we rise. And tomorrow, we lead." The applause was thunderous. I clutched the scarf around my shoulders, realizing it had become more than fabric. It was the banner under which this phoenix-like resurgence took flight. The following days blurred into action. Construction crews poured new foundations, their cranes lifting steel into place where twisted beams once lay. Modular labs arrived on trucks, pre-fitted for rapid deployment. Within a week, our scorched campus transformed into a hive of rebirth. Workers in hard hats marched alongside researchers carrying salvaged blueprints, their steps beating a steady rhythm of hope. Inside the temporary war room, I spent endless hours on video calls. London bankers finalized the transfer of funds. Nairobi NGOs mapped the first deployment sites for our solar purifiers. Tokyo suppliers rushed critical components across oceans, their containers stamped with urgent priority labels. Every call ended the same way, with gratitude, with urgency, with the recognition that our rebound mattered not just to us, but to the world. Ethan coordinated tirelessly with the executive team, weaving investor expectations into real-world logistics. He refused to allow bureaucracy to slow us. Speed is compassion, he reminded us. Every day wasted is a day someone drinks dirty water. We coined our recovery campaign, Phoenix Protocol. The phrase spread like wildfire, plastered on banners, printed on safety vests, hashtagged across social media. Within days, the story of our resurgence trended globally. From ashes to impact, Kashmir CEO's comeback, the lab that would not die. Journalists arrived by the dozen, their cameras capturing scientists unpacking fresh equipment, volunteers serving meals to weary crews, and Ethan and I walking side by side through the rising skeleton of the new lab. I overheard one reporter whisper, "It's like watching hope being rebuilt in real time." 2 weeks later, we cut the ribbon on the Institute for Sustainable Innovation. A gleaming new facility, larger and more advanced than the one we had lost, stood proudly where only rubble had smoldered weeks before. Families from pilot communities flew in to witness the moment. Children who once studied by candlelight now clutched solar lamps we had distributed. A mother held my hands tightly, her voice breaking as she said, "Because of you, my village drinks clean water. Please never stop." As Ethan and I sliced through the ribbon together, the crowd erupted into applause. Confetti drifted in the air, flashing in the sun like sparks of rebirth. My scarf fluttered in the breeze, carrying with it the silent promise that this lab would never be just brick and glass. It would be a forge for change. In my remarks, I spoke from the heart. We faced flames that tried to consume us. But compassion cannot burn. It grows stronger in adversity. This lab is not just ours. It belongs to every child who deserves light, every family who deserves clean water, every community who deserves hope. When the crowd roared in response, I knew this wasn't just recovery. This was transformation. That evening, Ethan and I retreated to the rooftop terrace of our headquarters. Below us, the city glowed with neon lights, alive with energy. Staff members gathered with sparklers and champagne, laughter mingling with the sound of fireworks someone had set off in our honor. He handed me a glass, his eyes softer now. We turned ashes into opportunity. But more than that, we turned despair into determination. I nodded, raising my glass. And every dollar we raised will ripple through lives we may never meet. That's what matters. We clinked glasses. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to feel the sweetness of victory. Yet just as we basked in our triumph, my secure phone buzzed with an encrypted alert. Project Phoenix Data Integrity Alert. Potential cyber breach detected. A chill ran through me. Our meticulously rebuilt systems now faced an invisible threat. He placed a steadying hand on my shoulder, determination blazing in his eyes. We'll stop the leak. Or it stops us. And as I stared at the warning screen, I understood that our greatest test might be guarding the very compassion we'd fought so hard to restore. When our share price doubled in a single trading session, and the number on my brokerage account blinked past $1 million, I realized I'd hit a rare milestone few ever reach. Yet as my heart raced over the sight of 7 figures, I understood that real wealth isn't counted in currency, but in the ripples of hope we send through others' lives. In that electrifying moment, I stood beside him not as a beneficiary of fortune, but as his equal partner, ready to co-create the legacy we both envisioned. From that balcony overlooking the trading floor, I embraced the truth that compassion, when wielded wisely, can outshine any stock rally. The trading floor erupted in chaos the moment our stock ticker flashed upward. Phones rang, traders shouted into headsets, and screens turned a brilliant green as CALV doubled in minutes. I stood at the balcony, clutching my scarf, my breath caught between disbelief and wonder. I pulled out my phone and opened my brokerage account. The numbers glowed back at me. $1,023,784.56. My knees nearly buckled. I had crossed the seven-figure mark. $1 million, earned not through inheritance or chance, but through compassion turned into capital. The noise of the trading floor felt distant as I absorbed the moment. I remembered the freezing subway station, the stranger with weary eyes, the simple scarf that started it all. To think that gesture had rippled into this, a public company valued in the billions, was beyond anything I could have imagined. Ethan appeared beside me, calm amid the frenzy. He adjusted the scarf gently on my shoulders, grounding me with a quiet smile. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised. "Ms. Everett, how does it feel to be a millionaire? Will you sell or reinvest? What's next for you and Caldwell and Everett?" Their questions blurred together. Ethan guided me to the podium, our steps perfectly in sync. I faced the floor, heart thundering, and spoke. "This surge is not about wealth alone. It is proof that compassion is not weakness. It is our greatest strength. Today we show the world that kindness can transform not only lives, but entire economies." Applause echoed across the floor. Ethan stepped forward. "And to honor that spirit, we are creating the Everett Caldwell Community Fund, a $10 million commitment to education, healthcare, and sustainable development." The announcement sparked cheers. Cameras flashed, traders clapped, and headlines were already being typed by journalists in the corner. That evening, employees gathered on our rooftop terrace. Cider flowed, cake was sliced, and even the most serious engineers laughed about watching their stock balances refresh. The scarf was passed around for photos, each person wanting to touch the fabric that had started a revolution. Yet as I looked out over the skyline, the weight of responsibility pressed on me. $1 million in my account meant little compared to the villages gaining clean water, the children lighting lamps to study, the families rebuilding after disasters. That was true wealth. Ethan joined me quietly. "This is just the beginning," he said, voice low. "The world cheers success, until it threatens their greed." I frowned. "You think they'll come after us?" His eyes didn't waver. "They already are." Minutes later, my secure phone buzzed. The screen lit red. "Project Helix Data Integrity Alert. Potential leak detected." My stomach twisted. Project Helix. Our most advanced, still secret prototype. A breach could destroy everything. Ethan's jaw tightened. "This could cripple us. But we've faced fire before. We'll trace it, seal it, or it stops us." We left the rooftop celebration and hurried to the crisis room, where IT specialists were already combing through forensic logs. The air was heavy with urgency, screens filled with streams of encrypted code. I tied the scarf tighter, bracing myself. Becoming a millionaire had lasted a few hours before reality demanded more. Wealth meant nothing without integrity. And I knew now, this fight was only beginning. As we dove into forensic logs and recall protocols, my phone buzzed again with another encrypted alert. Helix DB Integrity Alert. Unauthorized access at 1442 GMT. My breath caught. I realized the leak was live and deep within our network. He placed a steady hand on my shoulder, eyes steeled with resolve. "We'll trace it and seal every breach." But as I stared at the warning screen, dread coiled tightly in my chest. This fight would demand everything we had, and more. The leak ripped through every communication channel. News headlines screamed that our prototype was fundamentally flawed and unsafe. Investors wavered, employees despaired, and doubt crept back into every conversation, like a ghost we thought we had, laid to rest. In that furnace of cynicism and fear, where greed and suspicion threatened to corrode our bond, our partnership faced its most formidable trial yet. Would our shared conviction survive the onslaught, or would the siren call of profit shatter everything we'd built? The attack came like a tidal wave at dawn. First, a blog post hinted that Project Helix was a failure. By mid-morning, the rumor had metastasized. Major outlets screamed headlines like "Explosive Prototype Danger" and "Safety Data Manipulated." Our stock plummeted 20% in hours. Traders abandoned their desks, employees whispered in fear, and our inboxes filled with anxious questions from board members and regulators. I entered the office to find chaos. PR teams hammering keyboards, engineers clutching reports, lawyers pacing the halls. Ethan stood in the middle of the storm, his calm presence holding the fragments of our company together. It didn't take long to uncover the truth. A rogue insider had tampered with logs and sold fabricated data to a rival. Greed had slithered into our house, poisoning trust. My chest burned with betrayal, not just at the act itself, but at how easily it cast doubt on everything we had worked for. Ethan summoned me to the emergency war room. Whiteboards scrawled with red markers bore headings like containment, legal action, PR messaging. Screens streamed network traffic. "We fight this on 3 fronts," he said firmly: technology, law, and truth. By evening, forensic teams traced the falsified entries, legal counsel filed injunctions, and PR drafted a public statement. But the damage to morale was worse than the markets. Employees huddled in fear, some even questioning if they still believed in our vision. That night, Ethan organized something different: a candle-lit town hall. Hundreds gathered in the atrium, their faces lit by the glow of candles and LED strings. He spoke first. "I know you're afraid. I am too. But fear is the weapon of cynics. Tonight, we reclaim truth. Every test, every metric, every result, we will publish them all." Our vision began with compassion, not cover-ups, and compassion is stronger than greed. When it was my turn, I touched the scarf around my neck and spoke plainly. I gave away this scarf once, not knowing what would return to me. That act built an empire of hope. And I promise you now, we will not let greed unravel what kindness created. Questions came from every side. Engineers demanded clearer safeguards. Interns admitted they felt lost. Managers wanted assurance their teams wouldn't be blamed. We answered every question with honesty, every concern with transparency. Slowly, shoulders straightened. Doubt softened into determination. The following days became a campaign of truth. Independent auditors re-verified every test. Reports were posted online for the world to see. Whistleblowers within our ranks stepped forward, and we protected them with legal counsel and anonymity. Piece by piece, trust began to return. News outlets shifted tone. Headlines changed to "Sabotage Uncovered" and "Prototype Vindicated." Investors returned cautiously. Our employees rallied with newfound grit. Yet even in vindication, I knew scars remained. Trust once broken never heals without reminder. I clasped the scarf tighter, vowing that it would remain our compass, guiding us back to compassion no matter how fierce greed's attacks became. Just as we exhaled relief and prepared to move forward, my secure phone buzzed with an urgent alert. Everett Caldwell Community Fund, unauthorized, $10 million withdrawal detected. My chest tightened. Our heartwarming philanthropy, the very fund that showcased our compassion, had been targeted next. He appeared at my side, jaw clenched, and whispered, "They've hit us where it hurts most, but we rebuild, again, together." Yet, as I stared at the compromised account balance, I realized our toughest battle, defending kindness itself, was only just beginning. On our first wedding anniversary, crowned by the same golden cashmere scarf that bound our destinies, I realized our bond was woven from threads far stronger than contracts or boardroom alliances. Under a canopy of magnolia blossoms, I felt the full weight of a journey that had carried us from two strangers on a subway platform to soulmates co-building an empire. In that suspended moment, with petals drifting like gentle reminders of hope, I understood that our partnership had transformed into a family legacy, destined to outlast every scandal, every triumph, and every test of our resolve. The morning sun filtered softly through the penthouse windows, casting the room in gold. I reached instinctively for the scarf, the symbol of everything we had endured and everything we had built. Its fabric was worn now, frayed in places, but still carried the warmth of every trial and triumph. Draping it over my shoulders, I stepped out onto the terrace, where magnolia petals lay scattered across the marble floor. Moments later, Ethan emerged in a charcoal suit, holding a single blossom wrapped in satin ribbon. "Happy anniversary," he whispered, tucking it behind my ear. His eyes carried the weight of memory. The subway platform, the boardroom battles, the fires, the betrayals, and the strength of a man who had walked through each storm beside me. Inside, our living room had been transformed into a gallery of our story. Photos lined the walls, us beside the first rebuilt lab, us signing the partnership charter, us celebrating with employees after surviving sabotage. On the table lay tokens of our journey: his battered notebook, the locket, the business card embossed with both our names. Guests soon filled the space: engineers, interns, board members, community leaders, even families from villages we had touched. Each face was a thread in our growing tapestry. They gathered under a trellis of magnolia branches, petals falling like blessings. Ethan raised a glass first. "To resilience born from compassion," he toasted. "To every storm that tested us, every triumph that defined us, and to the partner who showed me that kindness is the foundation of everything." He tugged gently at the scarf on my shoulders, and the room erupted in applause. I lifted my own glass, my heart pounding. This scarf began as a simple act of kindness. Today, it represents millions of lives touched. Our partnership is not just business. It is family. It is legacy. It is eternal. One by one, our guests shared stories. An engineer whose paycheck funded school supplies in his village. A social worker who rebuilt clinics with our grants. An intern who found pride in telling her family she worked for a company built on compassion. Each story added weight to the scarf around my shoulders, as though it had absorbed the warmth of every life we had touched. Dinner followed beneath lanterns strung across the terrace. The food was simple, symbolic, shared dishes borrowed from communities we had served. Between courses, Ethan and I danced to the soft strains of a string quartet. I rested my cheek against his chest, feeling the steady beat of a man whose life was now inseparably entwined with mine. In that quiet moment, I whispered, "Forever feels possible tonight." He kissed the crown of my head and replied, "Forever began the moment you chose kindness." Yet as the final lantern flickered out and we prepared to retire for the night, my secure phone buzzed with a cryptic alert. "Urgent Global Emergency Protocol activated. Eliza Everett at required urgent response." His smile faltered as he read the message on his own device. "It's time to bring that scarf's warmth to the world once more," he said, resolve shining through fatigue. Hand in hand, we stepped into the waiting dawn, undaunted, united, and ready to write the next chapter of our eternal partnership. Under the first light of sunrise, we returned to the very subway platform where our lives first intertwined. My scarf, now frayed at the edges but brighter than ever, danced in the morning breeze, carrying the unspoken promise of tomorrow. As we stood side by side, the cacophony of commuters faded into the background, and I realized that a single act of kindness can reshape destinies forever. This moment was not our finale, but the prologue to a far grander journey, one that would echo across continents and generations. The subway station looked different that morning. New LED lanterns glowed along the platform, casting a soft halo, where once there had been only cold shadows. At the center gleamed a brass plaque. Here, a scarf of kindness wove 2 lives together. January 4th, 2025. I stood quietly, scarf wrapped around my shoulders, and let the weight of that moment sink in. A simple act, a fleeting choice had brought me here, to this platform, this mission, this life beside him. Ethan arrived moments later, his stride purposeful yet reverent. He touched the plaque, then brushed his fingers lightly over my scarf. "This is where everything began," he murmured. Curious commuters slowed as they passed. A young mother lifted her child, pointing to the plaque with a soft smile. A businessman paused mid-step, bowed his head, and moved on. A teenage girl whispered "magic" as she snapped a picture on her phone. Their quiet gestures told me that this story no longer belonged only to us. It belonged to everyone who believed that kindness could ripple outward, endlessly. That morning, we unveiled our newest initiative, Scarves of Hope. A banner stretched above us, declaring, "Warming the world, one thread at a time." Beneath it sat piles of scarves, cashmere, wool, merino, each embroidered with a discreet QR code. A simple scan revealed our story, a message of hope, and an invitation to pass the scarf forward. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady but full of conviction. 7 years ago, one scarf changed 2 lives. Today, we launch a mission to deliver 10 million scarves around the globe, each carrying warmth, compassion, and a reminder that small acts can spark revolutions. When it was my turn, I touched the edge of my scarf and said, "This is more than fabric. It is a story you can hold, wear, and share." Each scarf connects strangers, builds bridges, and reminds us that kindness is infinite. Every thread carries hope. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment as we handed out scarves to those gathered. A construction worker who whispered he'd give his to his daughter. A teenage girl who scanned the QR code and gasped at the story unfolding on her screen. An elderly woman who draped hers over a young mother and child, smiling through tears. Each exchange felt like adding a new stitch to the tapestry we were weaving across the world. Later, volunteers boarded a train, scarves in hand, and passed them from seat to seat. Commuters looked surprised, then delighted, wrapping themselves and one another in warmth. The train became a moving wave of color and connection, scarves fluttering like banners of solidarity. I watched from the platform, tears pricking my eyes, realizing we were witnessing a movement being born before us. "This is only the beginning," Ethan whispered, squeezing my hand as the train pulled away. From one act, to a million, to infinity. We stood beneath the station's grand archway, the morning sun painting the city gold. For a moment, I let myself breathe it all in. The plaque, the scarves, the smiles of strangers, and felt the truth settle in my bones. Our story was just beginning. Just as we stepped onto the train bound for new challenges, Ethan's phone buzzed with an urgent, encrypted message. "Urgent. Mass displacement crisis in Region Z. Immediate scarf deployment required." He looked up, eyes blazing with resolve. "Are you ready to take this warmth where it's needed most?" I tightened my scarf around my neck, heart thrumming with purpose. "Always." And in that instant, I knew our greatest chapter, our truest test, lay just beyond the horizon. Hit the like button if this story of compassion moving worlds warmed your heart. Share in the comments how one small act changed your life, or someone else's, and let's inspire each other. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss our next chapter of hope and impact. Pass this video on to a friend who needs a reminder that kindness can spark miracles. And join our community of changemakers today. Your like, comment, and share keep this mission alive. Let's weave a global tapestry of warmth, one scarf at a time.